Hey everybody, Juan here, welcome back to the channel. For this video, it's time we go back down memory lane and take a look back at the last decade of video games and highlight 5 of our favorite games during that time. I think there's a solid reason why people have been working on videos like this one. First of all, it's SEO friendly, it's trendy, it's the beginning of the year, but in all seriousness, you do got to go back and realize that you had games that came out on the PS3, but also games that came out on the PS4. You have AAA titles that came out for retail $60, but you also had incredible $20 to $30 digital-only games that came out during that time. Not everybody has played games during the last decade, and now on the road to the Xbox Series X, the PS5, maybe people want to be able to go back and be like, hey, is there anything worth playing on the Xbox 360 or the PS4 or anything else? But before we keep going and I present my top 5 favorite games of the last decade, if you like what I do, consider hitting that subscribe button, hit on that bell, go down to the comment section and let me know. This is my list, I'm going to be sharing mine, but I would love to know yours. Which are your 5 best games that you played during the last decade? At least for me, in the development of this list, I was thinking about the games that had the most significance to me. There are so many great games that to just pick 5 is criminal. It should be illegal because you have role-playing games, platformers, action games, a little bit of everything. Thinking about number 5, my first pick for my best games during the last decade has got to be Mass Effect 2, which I played on Xbox 360. Now, I did play the original Mass Effect game. I thought that the pacing was a little bit slow, and even though I saw the potential, and I love this, it's made from BioWare that has made games like Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic, one of the best video games of all time, right? So you have the pedigree to deliver an incredible game, but I think that they took the best things about the first game and made them 10 times better, because with this game, when you talk about the gameplay, focusing on the action, so much of it reminded me of Gears of War, because you have the cover mechanic, you have to shoot and everything, but how you go about it is entirely up to you. I began playing this game more so on the defensive side of things, right? So I tried to be very cautious, but then towards the end of the game, I'm like, you know what? I just want to go guns blazing, and I would have all of these outrageous attacks, and you would feel like a badass, but that decision happened not because the game forced me to do that, it was because I wanted to do it. The entire experience is focused on getting to one specific thing, and that is a suicide mission. So what your squad looks like, how they interact, how they engage with one another, the relationships that they develop, all of that really is taken into account towards the very last mission of the game. You know that eventually things can either go very much on the right side of things, or they can go horrible. And for me, let's just say things did not quite turn out the way that I thought it would, but I completed that game and I love just walking around the world, getting to know the characters, realizing what is the best squad for me, for my playstyle. So if you've played Mass Effect 2, I would love to know what you think about it. Let me know in the comments. Now at number 4, this was a very personal experience for me. Let's go back to 2018 with a co-op game where the entire premise was that you had to escape prison, but you weren't doing it by yourself. You were doing it with another person, both in the game and in real life. Let's talk about A Way Out. This was a game that I was very much interested in, but at no point did I feel like, oh, it is a day one purchase, because there was a lot of controversy about it. People didn't quite understand what was the point of it, right? I hadn't played a lot of story-driven games like the Telltale games. I know they're not exactly like this, they're very different, but still it's all about making decisions. What was truly unique about this game, and I don't think any other game has done this, at least to my knowledge, is that yeah, you can play with a friend either online or local, but they do not need to buy a second copy. So say I bought A Way Out and I wanted to play it with you. All I had to do was send you an invitation. You could actually download the game, and as long as I invited you, the person that purchased the game, you could play through the entire game with me. It's not about escaping, it's about how you escape and how you decide that, because the two characters, which this takes place in 1972, are polar opposites. One of them is an introvert, the other one is an extrovert, and I think the chemistry between them, the voice dialogue, the graphics, the story that happens. If you haven't played this game, I will not spoil a single second, because all I'm gonna say is that instead of, because this could be a question, instead of path A, path B, and path C, this game's more about this is the path, but what you say and what you do there is going to psychologically affect you. And keep in mind that you're playing this with another person. So I had multiple scenarios as I played this game with my wife where I wanted to choose this line of dialogue and my wife wanted to choose another one. And we would actually put the controllers down for multiple minutes and debate between one another. So what do we actually do? And to this day, even though it was only in 2018 that this game came out, I honestly haven't had any experience like I had with A Way Out. So if you've played this game, or at least if you know of another game that's quite like it, please let me know, because I am dying to play other games like this with my wife. Now, number 3, let's go back to 2016 with a game that this was the 6th entry in the series. It was my first time going into it, so I was very skeptical, I was very scared, but my good friend, who had also suggested that I play Mass Effect 2, told me, hey, just go into it, it's gonna be fine. The game does a really good job at explaining the story, where you're coming from and where you're at. Let's talk about Yakuza 6, The Song of Life. This game stars maybe one of my favorite characters of all time, which is Kazuma Kiryu. He is an older guy because everybody keeps saying he looks old, but when you look at him, he doesn't really look that old, but that's a story for another day. But he is the ultimate badass. He is the stone-faced man that does not deal with bullies in a verbal argument. He makes sure that the fist meets the face, and that solves the problem. This was a direct sequel to the previous games, but I at no point felt lost because I did think that the game did a really good job at just letting you know what role each character played. And much like A Way Out, I'm not going to spoil what happens because I do think it is an incredible story. With A Way Out, it was my wife and me playing a game together. With this one, it was me playing, but my wife felt like she was watching a movie because the cutscenes, the story, this is not a black and white game. This is not about you're a good guy or you're a bad guy. Everybody makes good decisions and makes bad decisions. And what I love about it is that the story is awesome, but even though it does take itself very, very seriously, it's not afraid to take it just a step back and, hey, you want to play karaoke? You want to go to a Sega arcade place and just have a great time? You can do that. And even some of the side missions just had me laughing out loud at just how ridiculous things got. And I haven't even talked about the gameplay. I think that this game, when you first look at it, it looks like a Grand Theft Auto game, and that's what I thought about it going in, but no. The entire place seems like an open world, but it's actually a fairly small area in Camarocho, and how you fight did remind me a lot of beat-em-up games. You can grab items from all over the place. As you level up, you can have combinations. Just by me talking about this right now, I kind of want to go back and play that game. And something else that I am thinking of doing is playing games like Judgment, Yakuza 0. There are so many excellent games, and people have told me that the previous entries in the Yakuza games are actually better than this one. And all I'm gonna say is that this game took one gameplay mechanic that I think that you, me, and many other gamers out there hate, which is the hunger system. I do not like getting hungry in games. I don't think it's fun. Here, they actually made it to your benefit. So every time you get hungry, you can go to a place to eat, and when you eat, you actually choose different things that boost up your stats. I'm like, wait a minute. They just turned something that I despised in video games, and I loved it, and I love the fighting, and I love Yakuza. Kazuma Kiryu, I love you, man. You're amazing, and you are a true role model. Play Yakuza 6. Now at number 2, we are going to be talking about an open world game. This is one that came out in 2011, and it is the 3rd entry in this series, which has since then gotten a 4th entry and one that it's not a real entry, but people don't really talk about Agents of Mayhem too much because it's like not that great. Let's talk about Saints Row the 3rd. So for context, I have never played a single second of the first Saints Row game. I don't think I even know what it looks like. And just last year, like November, December, I started playing Saints Row 2 on the Xbox One because it is backwards compatible. But this game takes place 5 years after Saints Row 2. And it is the definition of outrageous. I remember when Grand Theft Auto 4 came out, it just wasn't for me. I like Grand Theft Auto 3, San Andreas, I've played a little bit of 5, but this game takes the concept of an open world game and just gives it this insane adrenaline rush. You're gonna be laughing out loud. You can wear things that are questionable. You can use items that I refuse to showcase in this video because we'll probably get flagged. But I love this game for it because it's what happens when you're like, okay, so here's an open world game. It's a sandbox. And if people want to have a serious experience, although I think that's impossible to do that here, but at the same time, if you just want to laugh the entire way in co-op, because you can play this game in co-op, you can have yourself an incredible time. Yeah, look, I am a big wrestling fan. As a matter of fact, initially at number 5, I had WWE 2K14, which I also talked about on the A Cast to the Past podcast available on YouTube, but because I had brought up that game on a previous video, I swapped it for Mass Effect 2. This game, when you're running, you can do all sorts of wrestling moves. You actually eventually fight in a wrestling ring, and there are actual wrestlers doing voiceover. And whether you like wrestling or not, that over-the-top aspect of professional wrestling blended with this game is incredible. You can enjoy the driving, you can enjoy the battling and the awesome costumes, and to me, Saints Row the Third is one of the perfect open world games that I really think you should play. And before we get to my number 1 best game of the last decade, which I think that if you've been subscribed to the channel for quite a while, you probably know where this is going, but I love that game too much. I want to quickly bring up a couple of honorable mentions, including Asura's Wrath, an incredible game available on the PS3 and the Xbox 360. Gears of War 3, which came out in 2011. I love playing the Horde mode in that game. Sonic All-Stars Racing Transformed. I think that this game really does give Mario Kart a run for its money. It's available on PC, Wii U, and I'm really surprised that I know that we have Team Sonic Racing or whatever, but I'm surprised this game didn't come out on the PS4 or the Xbox One. Super Mario 3D World. I first played this game last year, so even though it came out in 2013, I was a late bloomer of sorts on the Wii U, and it is without a doubt one of my favorite Mario games of all time. We have Rogue Legacy, which came out in 2013. I think it's a really underrated roguelite game, where unlike games like Binding of Isaac, where every time you start from scratch, with this one, you do have to begin at the very beginning of the game, but you do get some permanent upgrades, and I love the art style, the music. It's a really good time. The Resident Evil 2 Remake. That's a game that was definitely, some days it made it into my top 5, it even made it into my top 4, and I played the game and I loved every second of it, but I'm really bad with horror games, and it's not my genre, but I love playing this game. PUBG, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, which came out in 2017. I played the game when it was in beta, alpha or something. That was the only game that I played for, I want to say like 4 to 5 months. I dropped off the Battle Royale genre a couple of months ago, almost a year ago to this point. I play games like Apex Legends and all that, but I will always remember the incredible moments that I had playing PUBG. Nidhogg 2. This is a game that I played on the Nintendo Switch, and it is a blast to play if you have friends locally with you, because it's all about, you have to get to point A from point B, but the other person has to do the same thing. So you're killing each other back and forth, and you have to kill them in order to be able to progress, and vice versa. There's weapons, you can throw them. It's super simple, and I really think you should check it out. WWE 2K14, I mentioned that on a previous video, one of my favorite wrestling games of all time, Spec Ops: The Line. This was another game that almost made it into my top 5 because not only is the gameplay great, and yeah, based on what you're seeing, it is a lot like Gears of War. The story, the setting, the characters, and the bonding that each one of them have is incredibly memorable. I went into this game thinking that I was gonna have a casual time, but as it kept progressing, I realized that it got grittier and darker and nastier because we are in a war setting. And I'm not going to spoil anything, but all I'll say is that if you haven't played this game and you like third-person shooters, please give this game a shot. We have Thumper. I also played this game on the Nintendo Switch. It's available on pretty much everything as far as I know, but the only reason that I never finished playing this game is that I played it mostly after Hurricane Maria, so there was no power. I would charge my Nintendo Switch, and that's how I would play it, but when power eventually came back, and I started playing this game, I only thought about the hurricane. So I've legitimately not played more than 5 minutes of it since after we got power back a couple of years ago, but one of my favorite music rhythm games, and holy crap is it frustrating. Okay, and before we get to our number one game, I gotta bring up two honorable mentions that as I was editing the video, I'm like, Juan, how could you possibly forget these two games? So first up, we have It'll Do 2 Plus, which I played on the Nintendo Switch and I will be showcasing in a future video. And the other game is Owlboy. I love the story, the world, just so many things about it. I know some people were complaining about the fact that maybe the game didn't have as much action as they thought it would, but personally, I loved almost every single second of Owlboy. And now, at number one, without a doubt, people, my favorite game of the last decade. I can struggle figuring out where these other games end up in my list, but this is a game that's just like, it's number one. We gotta talk about Dead Cells. This game really has changed my life because growing up, I did not play Metroid games, I did not play Castlevania games. I thought that the roguelike or roguelite genre was not my thing. Then I played this game after watching a preview video about it. My wife had gotten an early access for it on Steam, but it wasn't up until I got my hands on it on the Nintendo Switch that I fell in love with it. I would not just play it, I would think about it. Every time that I died, I would contemplate what could I do to defeat that boss. Much like Rogue Legacy, it is a roguelite. So yeah, every time you start from the very beginning, the same area, but everything else is procedurally generated. And not just that, you do get a couple of permanent upgrades. So that way, every time you start, you have a little bit of gold left over. Maybe you have access to a specific variety of weapons, and then you got to pick and choose. So what are your best weapons? Is it the shield? Is it the bow and arrow? But which one is it? Some of them are really good for long range. Others are awesome for short range. So your experience varies wildly, and that's what I love about it because it's a game that I poured over 30 hours into. Your 30 hours do not look like my 30 hours. And I think that's easy for games like Mass Effect, open world games, but we're talking about a side-scrolling game that does not have all this backtracking, although sometimes I ended up getting lost and I had to go back and I got frustrated, but it rewards you for every little thing. They've continued to update this game. When it first came out on the Nintendo Switch, it did not run great. It was okay, but they've added DLC to it, they've added free updates. It got to a point that it was like a brand new game, which many times I didn't even need to pay for because they were so awesome with some free updates. I think that something that a great game does is that, yeah, it can be super difficult, you can die a lot, but with Dead Cells, if I died, it was my fault. It was because I was still learning how to play. I didn't feel like I was struggling with the controller unless I was using the Pro Controller on the Nintendo Switch, which I love, but the D-pad sometimes is not that great, but that's a story for another day. It felt like I was the problem. I needed to improve, and without question, every time that I played this game up until the time that I beat it at normal difficulty, I'm still working on hard. I legitimately yelled out loud when I beat this game. And I can't think about the last time that I did that with another video game. And those were 5 of my best games of the last decade, in addition to the honorable mentions. I think this also gives you a pretty good idea of who I am as a gamer, something that I definitely noticed in comparison to 2 decades ago. Damn. My amount of RPG games that I played has dramatically gone down, which is to be expected because I've been working over the last decade. I've been doing a lot of different things, so the genres that I'm focusing on are things that I know I can pick up and play or do a pretty good job at catching me up. But I would love to know once again, which are your 5 best games of the last decade. And if you like this video and you like what I do, please consider subscribing, hitting on that bell, and up until next time, thank you for watching and supporting, and take care, everybody.